Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. and today I'm reviewing Street Fighter Champion Edition Legends from Colossal Games. Street Fighter is a 1-4 player, I would say dungeon crawl, I guess, in which you'll be taking on the role of various Street Fighters in this game as you go through a variety of scenarios, taking a variety of bosses, a variety of minions, basically combining a whole bunch of things to create the scenario you want to play through as you roll dice, as you build up, as you power up your cars, and as you try to figure out the most efficient way to take people down in this game. Hey, this is Future Alex over here. Basically, I forgot to mention that this is a prototype. All rules, components subject to change, and there'll be a link to this game found down below. Back to the video. In the game, you're basically going to be taking on the role of a Street Fighter. You'll have the Street Fighters, each player will have their own Street Fighter, even playing solo, you'll be controlling multiple. You'll be going ahead and then setting up the specific scenario you want. For right now, I have Kanzuki State set up over here. It's going to be different aspects, the setup tiles and all that, the specific rules and adjustments to the scenario. You'll then be choosing a boss as well as the various minions you'll be fighting against. So again, you have scenario, boss, minions, and then you'll be choosing your Street Fighters as well as your nemesis that you'll be fighting against. Every Street Fighter in play will have their own nemesis that they have to deal with as you go through the scenario. That's just the setup, so a whole bunch of mix and match. But we're not done yet. Your Street Fighter will come with their own power-up cards over here, and then you'll also choose a style deck that you'll use to match with them, the style deck you'll be drawing from and using to power up a variety of abilities, and also using these symbols on your cards to power up your little power-up action tiles over there. So again, a whole lot of choice going into just the scenario setup before you dive into anything else, although I will say it sets up in like 2 minutes because there's 3 tiles here. Every scenario consists of a tile and then 2 small side tiles. Very quick setup, very easy to dive into it. And then from there, you're going to start the game process where you're going to be taking turns. You're going to be alternating taking turns, activating your fighter, activating the enemies, going back and forth, trying to be mindful of how the enemies are going to react as you try to take them down as they are spawning. You see, ultimately, there's a timer on this game. There's going to be a boss in the game who's eventually coming into play, and your job is to stay alive long enough across the hordes of minions coming your way until eventually you can take down that boss with whatever degree of, scenario aspects they have in play, with whatever their special abilities are, as they go through the deck of cards, trying to slowly hurt you more and more throughout the course of the game. So you're trying to balance all this stuff heading your way, take down the boss, and then ultimately you'll win. In the game, what you're going to be doing is on your turn, you're going to be drawing cards. You're going to have a hand of 4 cards. You're going to be playing 2 cards per turn, cards that will both give you the effects on the cards, but additionally, they're going to go into your own power-up meter. You're going to have a power-up meter of cards, which you can use both defensively to ignore damage when attacked by discarding those cards, or to use them to trigger various power-up cards by matching the symbols to your abilities. So you're not just playing cards, you are playing cards too, but you're not just playing cards, you're also going to be using them both defensively and to power things up. In the game, the cards themselves just have a sequence of actions on them. You can go ahead and take a look, and every style deck, there's a whole bunch of style decks you can have as far as how you mix and match them with the fighter, but every style deck has slight differences to the ways they play or what they're stronger or better at. But for example, over here, we're going to have 2 damage over here with charge, then you can move after the attack, and then you can gain an experience. That's what's going to happen when you charge up over here. We have power release over here, where you're going to go ahead and have a ranged attack, and then you're going to go ahead and move one after the ranged attack. Power release again, and then dash, where you'll simply move 2 and get an experience. So you can see the cards have a handful of symbols on them. There's not a ton. There's going to be movement, there's going to be experience, there's going to be ranged attacks, there's going to be pushing. You occasionally have pushing as well, things like that. There's going to be, here we have a 2 damage card followed by a 2 damage card. So you're going to have opportunities as far as the various symbols in play. There's not a ton going on here, but it's the way you mix and match the various symbols in terms of what you're trying to do. As far as what does it mean to do a 2 damage attack, whenever you do a 2 damage attack, a 3 damage attack, whatever it is, you're going to be rolling that many dice and trying to hopefully take down. That is a great roll. That has never happened to me when I needed it. But you're going to go ahead and roll the dice, and you're going to be rolling that many dice equal to the damage of the attack, and then applying it to the enemy in question, looking at their health bar and seeing if you take them out, whether they are, one of your nemesises who have a higher health, whether it's the boss, or whether it's any of the minions, trying to look at the health bar and see if your attack did enough to take them out. There's going to be reroll and mitigation options in terms of spending experience you have in order to be able to reroll dice or add dice or do things like that, which will be essential because the enemies are very much 1 damage hits. You have to take them all out all at once, or you waste your entire attack on them, which means you need to be very, very mindful of when to commit extra resources to ensure you get the roll you need. But along with that, there's going to be additional effects. There's going to be moving enemies, moving yourself, trying to accomplish objectives to make sure the boss enters play as weak as possible. And then, like I mentioned already, those cards go into your timeline where you can then use them, not your timeline, your power-up line, where you can then use this card over here, this dash with the punch and the move symbol. I can use that to activate Zangief's Screw Pile Driver, where I'll go ahead and have the opportunity to pull somebody, followed by doing a 3 damage attack. So again, these cards, this card on its own, it's like, well, it's just doing movement and, and and experience, but it can also be used to activate these. But more importantly, your own power-up tiles can also be used out of turn, giving you an additional level of strategic depth as you try to prep for what you need to do on your turn, but have enough stuff in play, enough symbols in play, enough reactions in play that you can do things out of turn sequence to deal with what you need to deal with. When you're done with all that, the enemies are going to activate. The enemies are going to go ahead and activate, followed by as well as your nemesis over here. So the enemies are going to activate each enemy type following their own patterns. This enemy does 1 damage, then moves 1. This enemy goes ahead and pushes, follows by doing a ranged attack, followed by moving 1. So the enemy cards are going to follow their own process as far as the 2 different types of enemy minions. They might have ability modifiers here. So for example, against 11, double die results count as only 1, which means you have to be very careful. If you're only rolling 2 dice against them, you have to make sure both are hits, because you can't rely on a double die doing the damage necessary. So you have to be mindful of their abilities. They're all going to activate doing their damage. So again, right now, no one's in play right now in a way that can actually hurt me. But if Zangief just went, they're all going to deal damage here, then move. This one's going to push and then do a ranged attack. So, well, sorry, this one's going to push, then do a ranged attack. So this enemy over here is going to deal damage to me over here. So we're going to go ahead and take damage, or alternatively do a variety, discard cards from my timeline or things like that. And you're going to have all the enemies doing that, reacting, and then eventually having your nemesis reacting as well. So for example, Chun-Li over here is going to move, deal 1 damage, and if this attack deals damage, dealing another damage as well. So you have the opportunity to block it, which will effectively prevent 2 damage instead, even though it only costs you 1 damage of blocking. So you're going to activate all the enemies, you're going to activate your nemesis, and then you're going to go ahead and draw one of these cards over here, which determines the effects of the enemy cards in play, which card will happen over here. So we have, in this case, a King Rising shows the boot, so we're going to activate the Last Word ability, and then we're going to spawn enemies on those specific zones. So we'll spawn an elite enemy on zone 3, and then we'll spawn a regular enemy on zone 2. Effectively, that's what's happening in the game. That's the sequence. You take a turn, you go ahead and do the things you need to do, you activate the enemies, you activate the minions, you activate your nemesis, you activate a boss turn where they continue to throw more and more things at you, which is why you have to ensure that your 2 card plays a turn are effectively taking down as many things that are entering the board every turn while dealing with your nemesis, all while trying to effectively just survive until you can get to the point where you can start dealing with the boss. Now, along the way, you will be doing damage to enemies, and that damage you'll be killing enemies. And when you kill enemies, you'll be gaining experience that can be used both for a variety of effects to discard them when necessary, as well as to be able to power up these abilities. When you get a full experience bar, you can go ahead and upgrade your screw pile driver, and now it still continues to have the push over there, the pull, but it has the pull followed by the 3 experience, followed by the 3 damage, followed by the experience. So now Screw Pile Driver can be more powerful, helping you power up your other abilities even faster as you go through the game. And that's basically Street Fighter. You're going to be combining a bunch of variety of elements in the boss, the enemies, yourself, the fighters, all those things, in order to create the scenario that you'll be going through, and then going through a sequence of turns, you taking turns, bad guys taking turns, until eventually the boss enters play, and then trying to take down the boss while trying to survive the entire way through. Which brings us to the review, and I probably should have known this earlier. This is a prototype. I completely neglected to say this. I'll have to throw this in earlier. Hey, this is Future Alex over here. Basically, I forgot to mention that this is a prototype. All rules, components subject to change, and there'll be a link to this game found down below. Back to the video. Now with that, let's go ahead and dive into the review, starting off with ease of play. Rulebook is fairly quick to go through. It's a fairly short rulebook, fairly easy to pick up and learn just the various elements. This is one of the, in terms of this style of game, this is one of the quicker, easier to pick up ones that I've tried. There's a few aspects to note, there's a few symbology. Symbology is all handily available in terms on the back of the rulebook over here, so if you want to just see everything over here, quick reference to the various symbols. But the whole thing is very easy. It's like, I don't know, it's a handful of pages deep. It's a little longer. It's 14 pages deep, but it did not feel like 14 pages. Very quick and easy game to dive into. As far as what I like, don't like, and conceal as not liking, the first thing that I like over here is that the game is challenging. The game is like really difficult as far as going through this. This is a game where I think I lost it 3 times before I finally won it. This is a tight game. This is not a casual roll dice, hope for the best kind of experience. This is an experience where you have to be incredibly economical with every action you take. You have to think through which cards you want to play. You have to think through which symbols are going to be used to power up your extra attacks. You have to think through how you're going to prep for your out-of-turn sequences. You have to think through which objectives you're going to go through and when you're going to try to just take down the enemies. There is a lot to manage here, and it's incredibly tight and brutally mean in a way that I appreciate. You can win this, but it's not casually throwing dice and playing cards. There is a lot of actual planning required to make your way through the scenarios and survive the hordes of constantly incoming enemies in this game until eventually you can survive long enough to take down the boss. Speaking of which, the combination of the scenarios, the enemies, the fighters, the nemesis, the boss, all of that produces entirely different scenarios every single time you play it, which results in just a lot of variety as far as the experience you'll have. The various style decks you have as well, mixing and matching with those with your fighter. You just have a ton of variety as far as ways to mix and match to create the game state that you want. And then powering up your abilities with those cards, that whole aspect of the power up line, of trying to think through how you want to prep for it. And you do have a limit of 4 cards to your power up line, but trying to think through how you're going to mix and match all of that, because there's a lot of decisions to be making as far as how you're going to survive, as well as the mitigation and ways to spend things, ways of spending the cards in your power up line defensively, ways of spending your experience to upgrade or to prevent damage or whatnot. There's a lot of mitigation, there's upgrading your character, a lot of just general variety as far as what you can do in this gameplay past just playing cards and rolling dice. As far as what I don't like in the game, first of all, the cards not matched to the heroes feels a bit more ambient. Meaning they have this nice aspect where you have your hero, you have your special ability tiles, but then you have a style deck that you match to the hero, which works, it does, but it also means the heroes I feel like drop less of a sense of identity to the heroes. On the upside, it gives you more variety. You can mix and match decks and heroes in a way that gives you a lot of combinations. On the downside, it means that Zangief doesn't feel as much Zangief because he has his 4 tiles and then he has, you know, the charge deck or the grappler deck. So there's a little bit less of a sense of identity to the characters as you go through it. And on a similar note, I'll say that the scenarios don't feel significantly meaningful as far as the differences they provide. Don't get me wrong, the way you combine everything, the way you combine scenario, boss, fighter, nemesis, minions, all of those will produce different experiences, but I think that most of the variety in Street Fighter comes from the combination of a variety of disparate elements as opposed to many things feeling a stronger sense of identity. I don't think many bosses felt strongly that different, nor many fighters strongly that different, nor many scenarios strongly that different. When you combine it all, you will have totally different play experiences, but everything has small differences and then a lot of ways of combining things. As far as what I can see others not liking, this is very much a one-shot, and this is a good time to note again, prototype. I don't know if the final game will be different or any of that stuff, but this is very much a one-shot scenario type thing. It's mix and match, create a scenario, and dive into it. There's not a sense of a campaign. There's no sense of progression. And I don't even mean like a campaign with changes to a campaign, but I mean there's not even like a sense of like, hey, here's 12 scenarios and a kind of ambient story that you can pick any scenario and dive into in the way a game like Zombicide might handle it. It does feel very much pick things together, mash them up, create a scenario, and dive into it, which is not the worst, not by a long shot, but has a little bit more of that lack of a sense of identity that you might otherwise get. As far as final thoughts on Street Fighter Champion Edition Legends, that's a mouthful of a name. I really like the game with that caveat about this kind of ambientness to some of the elements of the game. The overall gameplay is challenging. It gives you a lot to think about. I'm not particularly a fan of the Street Fighter IP. Like, I've played Street Fighter games and all that, but I have no attachment. I could probably name half the characters, if that, and most of that is from oh my gosh, who's the, now I'm blanking on the name, the comedian, whose name I'm blanking on, who does the Street Fighter bits, but whoever he is, that's most of where I know my Street Fighter content from, so I'm not really attached to or have no affinity to the actual IP. That said, the actual gameplay was meaningful. It gave me difficult choices. The first time I dove into it, I was expecting a light, dice-rolling, card-playing game, and we got the game handed to us, and we did not have a chance there. And as I dove into it more and more and tried to approach it more strategically, there really is a puzzle of managing every single resource in this game, of managing every single decision in the game. There's a lot of, the only real complaint I have against it is that aspect of the ambientness, where I kind of wish the scenarios felt more meaningful. I wish the bosses felt more different. I wish the characters felt like they had more character to them as opposed to being a mashup of different things. Overall, there's a great deal of variety to the experience, but the variety comes from that mashing up as opposed to a sense of I'm playing this scenario or that scenario, if that makes sense. Overall, it's a 4 out of 5 for me. I really enjoyed the gameplay. I really enjoyed the tight decision making. I really enjoyed the difficulty of the game, as well as the overall variety the game provides. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, Zombicide. Like I mentioned already, if you're looking for a tough, specifically Zombicide Undead or Alive, if you're looking for a tough game that kind of gives you the illusion of dice rolling and powers and whatever it is, while actually being a very difficult game to play through, Zombicide Undead or Alive will give you a similarly challenging experience. And if you're looking for something more thematically similar to Street Fighter, that gives you a lot of decision space, Street Masters from Blacklist Games is one that I'd recommend as being a similar, and Street Fighter Champion Edition Legends is, by the way, originally from Blacklist. I believe they're working with Colossal in some sense, although it's only Colossal in the box, so not entirely sure that aspect there. But Street Masters from Blacklist Games, that one will give you as well a very different sense of this street fighting type gameplay. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.